to Innovating Leadership, Co-Creating Our Future. I am Maureen Metcalf, the CEO and founder of the Innovative Leadership Institute. And as with our annual practice, I am the guest, and our esteemed host is Christopher Washington, the Provost Emeritus for Franklin University and a fellow with the Innovative Leadership Institute.
It is so exciting, Maureen, to be a part of this conversation this year. I'm so pumped about having this conversation with you, especially after reading your recent Forbes article on the subject. Those who have a preference for action, this is the interview you want to listen to today. We're going to explore these essential questions related to these leadership shifts and essential questions. So let's jump into our first leadership shift, and that is AI fluency is no longer optional. We've been hinting at this. Maureen, you've argued that our relationship with AI is not one of just incorporating the IT function, bringing the IT person to the table, but it's rather one that should be viewed as an essential leadership competency. Why do you believe that to be the case?
One of the things that's interesting is moving AI from I as a leader type in some questions to I as a leader actually learn from the system. So an example, we're going into 2026. I'm thinking about our vision playbook for the next year. I load in a bunch of stuff. I ask it to come back and update it. And then I ask the question, what's missing? What would improve this? How do I shift it? How do I make our mission more concise? So instead of me being the one who's asking the computer to do something like it's been pre-established, I'm actually asking it to teach me in some cases. Now, some of the suggestions I think are helpful, others less helpful. So that gets to the fluency part. And as leaders, this can feel overwhelming that we could all spend full time just learning AI. That's not what I'm advocating. But what's the 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day that we can experiment and find out what is working? What short articles do we read once or twice a week? How do we go practice it so that we get smarter at our role as leaders?
I've heard it said that for an expert, in your case, you've interviewed hundreds of leaders, you have leadership frameworks and models. For a person with that kind of expertise, this has the potential to truly amplify your expertise, refine it a bit more. Is that the idea in having this conversation, a second and third set of questions, filtering it through your expertise? Are you getting at better results as a result of that in working with AI?
I am. And so there's some research that says people at the newer end of any skill, that there's a gap that we can fill. So you're a year in the job, you are in a great spot to really be elevated. For people who are more experienced, there's actually a risk of we could get dumber. If I look for the machine to give me answers, it may not be tapping into that unique wisdom I have. So the opportunity is for those of us who are experienced executives, how do we ask it to give us information so that we can continue learning, and so we can also then add in our unique expertise. But because it has done a lot of the go reread these things, go update these things, whatever it is, I now have more time to do the thinking rather than the revisiting of content that I wrote 5 years ago. And most of us don't have photographic memories, and we need to revisit. And the AI will actually then cite things that I've written back to me and quote me so I know where to start, but also recommend what I need to improve.
I have to think there's certain abilities that are required of leaders to fully leverage the strengths and the capacities of AI. What are some of those abilities you might recommend to the audience to really work on in order to successfully engage with AI to get the kind of results that differentiate them as successful leaders?
One is making it part of your personal leadership toolkit. Experiment with it. Talk to your team about the experiments you're doing. Demonstrate curiosity. We as leaders are unlearning how we did a lot of things that made us successful. So we need to hold lightly the things that we have been known for doing in some cases and really understand some of the use cases. And some are going to be fabulous and some are not. So it is back to that idea of experimentation as well, that not everything I do with AI is going to be exceptional. Some of it is I'm just muddling my way through and maintaining the mindset of curiosity and practice. Anyone who has golfed, and I do it very badly, you know that no matter how much you practice, you still have bad swings. No matter how much we practice new technology, I'm going to do a search and it's going to give me something I wasn't looking for. You know, the other thing I'm finding that's interesting is the precision with which I need to delegate to AI. I'm also finding that I am being more precise with the humans in my life because the AI gives me back exactly what I asked for. It can't say, you asked it wrong. It's a machine. I know I asked it wrong if I got the wrong stuff back.
That's good.
With my humans, I think they're not paying attention, which is my problem. So better feedback.
Garbage in, garbage out, quality in, the higher potential for quality output. And it really does force this sort of discipline in the way we think and present our ideas to it. Yeah. And I find as I use AI, I'm having the same result. I'm adding a little bit more clarity in my conversations on a regular basis. Maureen, you have been such a thought leader to me on this second trend, and that is this notion of human-centered leadership. And this year, you said you believe in 2026, it's going to be the new competitive advantage. In light of all the world changing and moving more toward the use of AI and other kinds of technology, you're advocating for the idea that human-centered leadership is the new competitive advantage. And in fact, you call it the new power skills. Why do you consider them the new power skills?
The more change we're facing, the more uncertain people are about everything. I am surprised how many meetings I've had recently that are less focused on strategy and vision and more focused on human dynamics. People are just struggling, and I'm talking highly successful C-level people, senior executives, and folks who have been our superheroes are hitting a breaking point in many cases. And so if our superheroes are wobbling, people who are normal human beings are wobbling more. So the ability to engage, help people build resilience, communicate with empathy, care, just demonstrate care, because we're going to be asking, we are already asking more of people. I was at a CEO event last night and folks are just saying, I don't even know where the time goes. Like I sit down at my desk in the morning and then it's 7 o'clock at night and I've not lifted my head. Folks who were good at basic care aren't eating. That I'll have a conversation and hear, oh yeah, I had a protein bar to eat today. I haven't taken time to even do the basics. Now I take time to get coffee, but I don't always take time to eat. So how do we ensure when we are asking for people to do more? So I realize AI is going to do some, it's going to do a lot, but our humans have to learn, they have to change, they have to unlearn, they have to get comfortable doing things that may be antithetical to where they see their value in the world. So we're asking for people to fundamentally change how they perceive themselves and how they contribute to their organization. And that requires brain cells, it requires emotional intelligence, it requires self awareness. And so, for the vast majority of people who have been rewarded for running faster, doing more, we're now asking them to slow down, recalibrate, right? If I want to realign the wheels on my car, I have to put it on a lift, put it through a machine, and realign.
Yeah.
With our humans, we expect them to run as fast as they can and realign, and they get wobbly, just like my car. Even machines get wobbly, and our humans get more wobbly.
You said to me before when we talked about human-centered leadership that people need to be seen or feel seen, heard, and valued. And I imagine when you're moving so fast, we can lose that connection to people where they don't feel seen, where they don't feel heard or valued. And you talked about emotional intelligence or empathy, inclusion, authentic connection that makes them feel that way. Is that kind of the general idea? We need to be, our energy is important as leaders in creating the context for people to feel seen, heard, and valued. Is that right?
That is brilliantly said. And think about, Christopher, the amount of times that you are rushing to meet whatever the deadline is for a big funder, for a big customer, for big meetings, whatever it is, and somebody grabs you in the hallway and needs something. And our core reaction is, I've got to escape to get back to finish the thing to do the job. And we forget that part of our job is engaging our people. I'm guilty of it. There's so much to do that I'm afraid I don't engage my team sufficiently so that they feel included.
Maureen, you said something I thought was really interesting. We get to grab them in the hallway, but a lot of folks don't even get to grab them in the hallway anymore. It's in hybrid work environments. It's online. You seem even further distanced emotionally and personally from the people you work with. And so I can imagine this being even a higher hurdle to jump when you're working with people and wanting to make them feel seen, heard, and valued.
Which may be why I'm having some of the conversations I'm having where people are just struggling. It may be in part that they are not connecting with their colleagues. And for many people, that professional connection is foundational to well-being. Not everyone, but for a lot of people, we spend more time with our colleagues than with our family.
If that's true, then how might we encourage leaders to cultivate these abilities to create the kind of context that enables people to feel valued, important, and to achieve the goals that are important to the organization?
One thing I'd say is put it on the calendar. I realize that doesn't sound very engaging, but if I look at your calendar, I can tell what kind of leader you are.
Ooh, say
All of
more
your
about that.
tasks, if all of your tasks are deliverables, Teams meetings, other meetings, you're running in, you've got an agenda, you run out, you go to the next thing. Have you made time to genuinely engage with your people? Now, genuinely engaging in a hybrid setting may be in a meeting, but do you have mentoring meetings? Do you have coaching meetings? Do you have feedback discussions? And I was actually thinking about this with my team the other day. We talk weekly, and hopefully they are hearing feedback about how we're doing, and we're having not only is the task getting done exchanges, but how are you feeling about the work? How are you feeling about the team? What do you need to be more effective? And that isn't just a productivity conversation in my view. Now, they may say differently. It's a how do you feel conversation because I acknowledge that we can be productive and feel completely isolated.
Maureen, before retiring, I had a wonderful assistant who had that as part of her experience to create special moments for people. She would acknowledge celebrations, celebrate milestones like birthdays or workplace anniversaries. When there were significant accomplishments, she would build in time to stop and pause or incorporate an agenda item in our meetings to celebrate that accomplishment so that we took a breath from time to time and acknowledged the humanness that went into the work and valued our community together when we had a chance. I think that was a real powerful thing. And she put it on the calendar. And so I love the idea of calendaring events, celebrations, milestones, and recognizing and acknowledging people. Yeah.
Because otherwise, you and I both look at the to-do list, we look at the blocks on the calendar, and that's what we do.
That's right.
If
That's right. But let's move on to our third theme, and that is agility. This is my favorite one. This is one that hit me the deepest. It's agility is the new stability. Wow. Why did this one hit me? Well, you discuss agility not simply as speed, but as disciplined adaptability, balancing experimentation with purpose. And you also highlight the need for leaders and organizations to become stronger because of stress, not in spite of it. And that's an idea that just resonates with me. I always notice that sometimes when organizations are going through stress, some organizations really decline because of their fragility. Some sort of work hard to get back to where they were, and some get better and stronger. I've always noticed that. And so you talk about the idea of agility as the new stability. Can you talk about what you mean by that idea?
So, we have been talking for a long time about leaders demonstrating the mind of the scientist. The and what is changing is it was a nice to do then, it's a must do now. So, let's use AI as an example because we launched with that, but any number of launching a new product, changing a technology, onboarding a new customer, there are things that we do with operational excellence, right? So if you're doing financial reporting, agility may not be your first strength. But if you are doing work that can be consistently improved through experimentation, Christopher, I know you launched several different majors when you were at Franklin.
Yes.
My assumption is you gathered data, you tested ideas, you launched as pilots. The pilots that worked, you scaled. The ones that didn't work, you closed down. That idea of moving through that experimentation cycle quickly. So we make small bets. People like Cotter have been talking about this forever. And Good to Great. Who's the author of Good to Great? Beep.
Oh, geez, I'm drawing a blank.
Connor
Collins.
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 So people like Jim Collins have been talking about this for a long time. It's the small, consistent bets that we identify opportunities. The other thing that is fascinating to me is if we treat decisions as experiments. So we're looking at doing a reorg. People get really wiggy about, I used to report to this person and the title change impacts my perception of myself, external influence of power, all those things. So we make a change and people interact as if it is forever they're destined to this new thing, rather than let's try out the new way of working for a month, give feedback. We're not going to change titles, we're not changing pay, we're going to experiment with how this works. And they consent, not consensus. I'm willing to give it a shot. We consent to try, and then we give feedback, we make changes. So this gets back to the human piece of unlearning, relearning, asking people to try new things, but they also have a voice. Because if I have no voice, I'm a victim in essence, right? If I have a voice in consenting to the experiment, but I have become one of the experimenters, not one of the lab rats.
Yeah.
Because lab rats probably don't love their lives. Experimenters more likely to engage.
I knew this one was one that hit me deeply because it's more about, it's not just about the leader and the I, it's about the we and bringing people
Mhm.
along and making people feel like they're a part of the experimentation process. And so you get the buy-in when things don't go well. As a leader, you likely will say, hey, we tried, we did our best, let's try something else, which can be encouraging. It's really creating the context for a collective agility. Would you say that's the case?
I think absolutely, because if you and I are agile, but everybody else is collapsed, barely getting by, it all we're going to do is do more experiments that cause them to further collapse and become more overwhelmed. Our collective ability goes down. So if we're not building agility across the system, technology, process, humans, then all of our experiments, I think, make us worse rather than better. We're not more agile.
Is there anything you might say to leaders who are really working to develop more agile groups or organizations? Something, an ability they may want to exercise to accelerate this process of adapting to change in our world?
I would say for the leader themselves, first of all, evaluate your resilience and ask the question, do the disruptions make me stronger or weaker? If they are making me weaker, I am not anti-fragile. And the goal is to learn from the disruptions and become better. And then the second piece of that is looking at our organization, back to technology, so systems, processes that go with that, and people. As we're looking at AI and human centered, are we weaving together this volume of change we have to implement in a way that all of us are aligned as agile rather than scattered about some variation of agile and not?
I suspect that some people are probably better positioned to be agile and to participate in agile communities. And there might be some folks that are little, it may be a little bit of a challenge for them to become more agile. They probably used to following rules. Any advice in terms to leaders in terms of how they might be patient with people being at very different places as they deal with
It's
this sort of transition into being more agile?
it's a great question because if we think about my phase of life, I have no children at home, so I'm able to do yoga regularly and do all the self-care stuff
Yeah.
and get a decent amount of sleep. If I have a full-time demanding job, a spouse that works, I work, we've got kids that are involved in all kinds of activities, I may have aging parents, all the things, 8 hours of sleep is not on the agenda.
Right.
Doing personal restorative stuff may happen on the weekends, maybe, if I'm lucky, if I'm not going to kids' games and doing all the stuff. Understanding where people are and extending grace, I think, is really crucial because many of us who have gotten to senior roles are also in a different phase of life where we can work longer hours. Some of our younger colleagues don't have those options. And so my sense is understand where people are, extend grace, but also accountability. So not getting your stuff done impacts the rest of the team. That's not okay. We still have to talk about how do we balance. And it may mean I find myself saying so and so didn't do something. Let's figure out how we rewire the work because that person isn't going to deliver that thing. I have learned that it's either a misalignment of responsibility or time, or during the summer when kids are off, the the schedule changes, any number of things, and we're running a business. So how do we balance business needs and human needs? And What can I get AI to do that I used to have humans do?
All of these things suggest your next theme. The fourth theme you mentioned in the paper is that the manager role is being reimagined. And I can see that based on our conversation, even when we talk about agility and culture and bringing people along, and agility of systems, not just people. Everything else in the environment has to be somewhat agile to adapt. But here you suggest that managers are becoming the primary carriers of organizational culture. And I felt that as a leader, that if I brought a certain kind of energy and a set of values to a place, it impacted the people I worked with. If I went into the workplace with opposite energy and did not convey a set of values that we all, maybe open, just, caring, purposeful, disciplined, celebrative, if I didn't suggest these values, it impacted the organization in a negative way. And so here you're saying that managers really, this role is being reimagined. What do you mean by that idea?
Part of this goes back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
So, in times of significant flux, we need a clear strategy about what we're doing and what we're not doing. And adhering to that seems crucial. Now, we may have a 5-year plan and we're continually revising. I'm not saying do outdated stuff, but we're revising and continually making the decisions about where we focus our energy, how much money, how much human energy we have. Clear accountabilities and holding people accountable to deliver seems more crucial now. As labor forces get tighter, workloads get heavier, dropped balls from one person can ripple through pretty quickly, and others have to pick it up, and others are stretched too, which then creates a sense of imbalance and unfairness and resentment, which leads to the quiet quitting or hostile quitting or actively disengaged and disrupting. So accountability balanced with care. And so the coaching.
So you have this idea that there are values like fairness that are behind some of these ideas, but practices like assuring clarity, focus, accountability, not just to the work, but to each other. And then this idea that there are certain practices like coaching and culture building and talent development that are essential to this manager role. Am I missing anything here?
The only one I would say that comes up a lot is people want to feel like they are dedicating their life force, their energy when they come to work to something that matters. So we may produce a product that I feel relatively indifferent to, but in that organization, what matters is I'm supporting my family. We may have a social mission that we support Meals on Wheels or Junior Achievement or some other thing. How do we help people connect what they care about to the work we're asking them to do?
So clarifying the work is like the what, but clarifying the purpose is like the why, right? Why do we do this? And you're saying we need to, as leaders, be good about clarifying the why in a world that's changing.
Agreed. And I want to amplify one of the other things you said is people come to work with an expectation that if I give my energy to you, my employer, there is some fair exchange. And part of the fair exchange is you invest in my development. You understand what I care about and create opportunities for me to do those things. So I'm not a cog in a machine. I'm doing the work I value, and I have the opportunity to progress in a way that I define progress, not the way you define progress.
These themes tie together so neatly, in my view. This harkens back to your notion of having people feel valued in a human-centered organization. Yeah. Maureen, your next theme, the fifth theme, is sustainability is now strategy. And I think there's a lot to unpack when you say that sustainability is becoming the new strategy. It means sustainability. This concept means so much to so many people. I think about it as existing from one year to the next, that there's something that is sustainable over time. What are the targets or enablers of sustainability for leaders in your view?
Let's start with the fuel of the business is money. If we're not making money, we're not paying our people, we're not delivering products. I don't want people to hear sustainability as some over the top thing. It starts with being good stewards of the resources we have. So we've talked about human energy. How do I sustain my people's energy so that they continue to show up and feel valued and work? How do I we're hearing a lot of conversation about power and water, that AI and data centers are sucking up a lot of power and water. So, how do I attend to ensuring I am being efficient?
Mm-hmm.
One of my clients is a chemical manufacturing plant, and they are facing, as we all are, elevating power prices. For them to maintain their pricing, they are looking at what equipment will be most efficient. So it's not green for the sake of green, it's green for the sake of running an efficient, effective organization. I love that people also care about the environment, but I am sensitive to that getting painted as a nice to do, not a must do. For many of our clients, it's a must do to maintain their pricing structure.
And it sounds like for leaders, there's a cultural corollary, right? So it's about how do we manage the energy of our people, right? So you want to talk about that as a sustainability element?
So this goes back to the human-centered leadership,
Yeah.
and let's tie it to agility as well. So if people perceive me as the manager who brings in, oh, I read this in Harvard Business Review yesterday, or I saw this on TikTok, or whatever the thing is, and we are blowing around in the wind versus very clear strategy, accountabilities, organizational and operational efficiency, really needing to be laser focused on who are our customers, what's our strategy, where's our revenue come from, and how do we invest our human energy to deliver against that so that our customers are happy, we're serving our community, and our employees are both engaged, feel supported, and do good work. That side of it is a self-reinforcing system.
Yeah.
The inverse is also a reinforcing system of doom.
When you talk about this idea of sustainability, you seem to have a very comprehensive view of it, that it's about long-term value creation. And so that leaders have to then think about not the people, the processes, the technology, the finances, everything working together in the most sort of energy efficient manner is how I'm concluding. Is that a fair conclusion?
I love the summary of in the most energy efficient manner. So it accounts for power, water, and human energy, and financial energy. All
Yeah.
of those, if we define them as energies, go into a system, and what comes out is either energy efficient or inefficient, and each lever will need to move in different rates at different times depending on the situation.
I think that's one of your next articles, talking about these energies working together. I love this idea. This is it hit me very deeply, Maureen. Let's move on to the last theme for leaders that you write about, and that is that leaders must become unifiers to create cohesive organizations. Leaders must become unifiers. I think most Americans can see polarization in the workplace, in their communities, and in our world, and they view it as a negative thing. But we've fallen into this pattern in our society. I've had colleagues in other countries contact me and say, I'm worried about your country right now because of this polarization and how we experience it through our media. It just seems like the U.S. is broken. I've heard that. I don't know what to say. I don't hear it from their perspective, but that's what I'm hearing. You argue that in this sort of polarized world, if we can make that assumption, leaders must be unifiers. What do you mean by that?
So, International Leadership Association had some research a few years ago, and it was, I'm going to paraphrase, not looking it up, but things like if I disagree with my boss's politics, I am 50% less likely to follow their direction. And there were several different factors. So, if I don't align with you as a human being, I'm not going to follow you. Let's then pair that with some of Meg Wheatley's research, and this is also older research, that if we can't cohere, we can't develop solutions because we're asking people to step out, trust each other. I don't put forward creative ideas if I think I'm going to get whacked at the knees or worse, right?
Right. Sure.
So creating an environment where it is safe to innovate, which gets us again back to one of our energies. If I have to be safe before I'm willing to put forward ideas and do the wobbly behavior of trying something new, unlearning, relearning. It's just think about how kids learn to drive. They're wobbly. Sometimes they hit things. So we need the guardrails. How do we create the context where we can do all of those effectively?
I've got a 16-year-old, Maureen. I'm worried about him hitting things right now. I just went into a trauma experience when you said that. What abilities then, Maureen, would you say people need to cultivate in order to be this unifying force in the workplace?
So I'll go to the research of Jim Ritchie Dunham, who talks about back to the idea that I feel safe, appreciated, and valued. So the human-centered part that and it also ties to the experimentation part. So if we are living in a world where it is safe and encouraged to experiment, then I am also expected to be not perfect, like your 16-year-old. And you want to make sure your 16-year-old does not die in a car wreck. That's right. So we create the environment for people to try new behaviors, make mistakes. This is where the rituals of cohesion that you talked about, that your chief of staff would ensure people got together, had opportunities to connect as humans, not just cogs in the machine. So it's the language we use, it's the rituals we create, and it's the structure. It's our managers coaching, not just, quote, managing. I'm not just trying to squeeze out the last drop of performance. I'm trying to create a context in which you want to come and perform and learn and get better. Beyond grit is this depth of capability that many people want to bring because they feel good when they perform excellently. Look at world-class athletes. They're not always rewarded. Now, we also have some that make lots of money, but there are others that perform because that the excellence feeds their soul, not just their pocketbook. And so how do we create a context where you and I can differ, put our ideas on the table, and we both get smarter?
I love this idea of safe, encouraged, and valued. Who did you recommend if someone wants to explore those ideas a little bit more?
One is Jim Ritchie Dunham and the
Dunham.
Institute for Strategic Clarity, as well as now he's back at Harvard as a researcher, and it's the Human Flourishing Project that is Harvard, Saxion, and there are some other universities. But there is a lot of good research on how do what structures need to be in place for humans to flourish. And we have several podcasts with Jim.
Any particular thought about in this world, we still are going to have conflicts? Any sort of ideas about how we, in this context of creating safety and making people feel encouraged and value, how to manage conflicts? And maybe that's a whole other podcast. I've heard you once say that managing conflicts with grace is a really wonderful objective.
Yes. So part of me wants to just say, suck it up. We're going to have conflict. It is a reality of humans.
Yeah.
For anyone who has ever been married, if you are truly authentically present, you're going to have conflicts.
Yeah.
Your colleagues you've generally not chosen that level of commitment with, of course there's going to be conflict. How do we do it in a way that is respectful and again elevates? How do we use conflict to help us be anti-fragile rather than more fragile?
Yeah. Maureen, we've talked about 6 major shifts taking place here, and there's a lot of overlap in these shifts. I wondered, of all the shifts you've identified, which abilities do you believe leaders should start cultivating today if they want to remain relevant, resilient, and effective as we move into 2026?
Figure out where you're weakest and what you need the most. So for some people, AI literacy may not be the most pressing skill. It may be human-centered. For others, it's understanding the systems and the energies and how to ensure sustainability. So what does your context most require of you, and how do you either strengthen it or build it? And then work down the list. Prioritize like you would prioritize anything else.
That's great. Maureen, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughtful, forward-looking insights for 2026. This interview did not disappoint from my viewpoint. As usual, you've challenged me to rise, to evolve, to ask better questions, and to lead with deeper purpose. Make sure I'm clarifying the purposes with people, not just the what's, but the why. And so is there a message you'd like to leave with your listeners today? And if there is, what is it?
Okay, so message for our listeners. Lots of changes. Some of them we will love, some of them will concern us. Identify the areas where we can contribute positively and where we can mitigate the risks. So if I am concerned about AI taking my identity, find ways to protect that. But there are also immense opportunities. For me as a business owner, I'm using AI to be much more efficient for my clients, which means they pay less for a better work product. And for each of us, I think there are immense opportunities, and it means I have to change how I work. I need to do all the things that I talked about in this article in different measures on different days.
Maureen, I want to thank you for allowing me to interview you again this year. I've learned a lot, and I think you've done a great job of helping to illuminate the path forward for our audience today.
Christopher, thank you for all of the time and care you put into pulling this together. I realize it's hours of prep for a short interview. And to our listeners, I really invite you to consider what are your strengths, how do you mentor others who would like to become you, and who do you look to build those practices to fill in the gaps to be that leader that is possible for you.